ඔබතුව ආරාධනා කර සිටිනවා මෙතෙන් සිට දේශනය පවත්වන හැටියට.
බෞද්ධ අධ්‍යයන පීඨයේ පීඨාධිපති මහාචාර්ය වාව්වේ ධම්මරක්කිත හඳුරන වහන්සේ, පාලි අධ්‍යයන අංශයේ අංශාධිපති ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ කතිකාචාර්ය ආචාර්ය මොරගොල්ලා මුප්‍රතන හාමුදුරුවෝ සහ මේ වැඩමුළුවේ සම්බන්ධීකාරක ආචාර්ය ලෙනකල සිරිනිවාස හාමුදුරුවෝ ඇතුළු මහා සංඝරත්නයේ අවසරයි, ආචාර්ය මණ්ඩලයේ දයාබර සහෝදර සහෝදරියනි, මගේ මාතෘකාව ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් තියෙන නිසා සහ මේ පරිශන පත්‍රිකාව ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් ලියලා තියෙන නිසා සහ මීට පෙර මා අවසාන වතාවට ඉදිරිපත් කරපු වෘත්තීය සංවර්ධන වැඩමුළු ඉස්සරහා ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම ශාස්ත්‍රීය අධ්‍යයනයක් නොවන නිසා, ඒක ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන් නොතිබුණ නිසා ඒක සිංහලෙන් කරා. ඉතින් මම හිතුවා දෙවැනි අවස්ථාව මේ අනුන්ගේ අවස්ථාවක් මට හම්බුනේ. ඒ නිසා මේක ශාස්ත්‍රීය අධ්‍යයනයක ප්‍රතිඵලයක් වන මේ පරිශන පත්‍රිකාව ලියලා තියෙන භාෂාවෙන්ම ඉදිරිපත් කරොත් සුදුසුයි කියලා. So I decided to do the presentation today in English medium. The topic that you can see over here is rationalizing the English language influence on modern Sinhala language. Before starting the presentation, I'd like to take your attention towards the topic as well, because one variable I need to define over here into the depth, that is modern Sinhala. It is not explained in the presentation, so that I'd like to take your attention towards the topic first. Modern Sinhala, in the sense, the Sinhala language can be divided into two eras, classical period and modern period. Here the term derived from that particular based, classical and modern. But for the presentation and the research, of course, I have paid my attention towards the spoken variety of the language. Sinhala is a language which has a diglossia. It has two varieties, two layers, spoken and Sinhala. Spoken Sinhala and written Sinhala. There are some other languages as well in the world which has two layers. Diglossia in India, Kannada. In the European language family, you can see Greek as a language which has a diglossia. So Sinhala, as we have two layers, I have taken only the spoken variety, spoken layer for this particular research work. These are the areas that I am trying to cover during this allocated time. First, I'll be explaining objectives of the research work, then method and materials, background, how significant this research work, then discussion. It has been divided into two small topics, reasons in a broad sense and specific reasons that I have found out through the research work. Then ultimately, I'll be discussing conclusions plus very few future indications. Objectives. There are four objectives in the research work. The first one is identifying the actual reasons of English language influence on modern Sinhala. Because when you just see the topic, you would think that, of course, what is to be researched over here? Because everybody knows why English has come to Sinhala, why this mixed discourse is used in Sri Lanka, because that is an obvious fact, as you can see. But as a researcher, I find something else. I feel that we need to investigate into the depth in order to understand the specific reasons. So that's why I have set the first objective over here as the identifying actual reasons of the English language influence on modern Sinhala. Then the second one is putting them into specific terms. Specific terms in the sense I need to present the influence in an academical manner. I need to rationalize the influence. That is why I have included second objective over there, putting them into specific terms. Then understand the future of an isolated language in an island. Sinhala being a language which is being used only in a single country, and also we have no other language communities in the world. We need to see the future of this language as well. So this kind of research works are really required to do that. Then support into the language planning efforts through findings. These are the objectives that I have set at the outset. Then methods and materials. This is almost a desk research which hardly used other research instruments to collect data. Of course, it does not implicate that I have not used other research instruments. There are, but in a very limited space. I am not going to discuss them into the depth because my major job today is to discuss the findings of this research work. Primary and secondary materials were main sources of the data gathering. Data analysis was done, of course, based on qualitative techniques. No quantitative data supported to the conclusion at all. Then what is the background? When you look at the language influence, particularly in Sinhala, it has a very long history. Polonnaruwa period is a very specific period where we can see a huge influence from Sanskrit. Lot of Sanskrit words came into contact with Sinhala language because that at that particular time Sanskrit was a popular language here in Sri Lanka and also Pali. But Pali, in comparing with the Sanskrit influence, you can't see a huge collection of words in Sinhala, a huge collection of Pali words. There are many Sanskrit words. If you compare them together, that is more than 200%. Sanskrit words are available when you compare with the Pali language. But in Sinhala language, there are some other language influences as well when you look at the history. Sanskrit, Pali, Tamil, Greek, Chinese, Dutch, Portuguese, Malay and English. Now you may be thinking that how Greek, Chinese and certain Tamil words came into contact with Sinhala. Yeah, there are. For an example, Greek words. There's a word which is called hela in Sinhala. Hela, helayo, helayo. Of course, this is an argument. There's an argument. There's a debate in this discussion. The Greek word helio may be the origin of hela. That has been discussed by previous researchers as well. And very few Chinese words. They may not be originally Chinese words, but derived terms in Sinhala, you can see a word which is called kangkung. When you look at the pronunciation and the origin of this certain term, lexical item, our linguists have taken into this particular fact in their discussions, this as a Chinese word. And ping pong, chi, those sounds are also quite relevant with Chinese pronunciation. Then Dutch, Portuguese, Malay and English are obvious. You can see a lot of research works on these areas. But I am not going to discuss those language influences in Sinhala, as my attention is totally focused to the English language influence. Finally, in this background, the influence has not been presented so far scholarly by reasoning the behind forces. Other language influences like Sanskrit, Pali, Tamil, Greek, Chinese, Dutch, Portuguese, Malay, yes, there are studies. In English, yeah, English influence, of course, that has been investigated into the depth, but no one has investigated the reasons in an academic manner into the depth. So that is why I am trying to do this as an academic. So what is the significance? Whatever the research work that you do, that is a contribution to the academia. So my research also will be some sort of a contribution to the academia, because this particular topic lies in sociolinguistics. In Sri Lanka, that is not an autonomous discipline. That is, of course, that is a part of the major discipline of linguistics, but Sri Lankan contribution to the subject of sociolinguistics is very poor. So my research, in a way, will be a contribution to the subject area as well, and also strengthen the state policy planning with reference to official languages, official language policy. Here in Sri Lanka, the official language policy is a very crucial discussion, because it has created a lingering gap in between nations for years. So policy planners, they need to take into account the research studies which have been conducted in this area in order to plan out the language policy in a long-lasting manner. So apart from all these, awareness of general public is really required. We need to understand what's happening around our language. Though we are using the mixed discourse, we don't know what's happening in the future. So we need to understand about the language. That awareness is required for a people who are using Sinhala language, because as I told you at the outset, that is an isolated language in an island. Reasons in a broad sense. Basically, political matters such as invasion, linguistic hegemony, colonization and American expansion are very common root causes for language influences, even in other Asian languages, in Asian countries. When we come into Sinhala, of course, in Sinhala language, we can see certain reasons, these common reasons as well. In addition to the political matters, the other important reasons are sociological reasons, intervention of globalization, commercial, industrial and religious factors in a limited space you can see in the language influence in Sinhala. But we need to understand specifically the reasons which are common to not only Asian languages, which are specifically linked with Sinhala language. So specific reasons are these. I'm going to discuss them in under two, of course, major eras. The first one is, you can see over here, language contact is a common phenomenon which has been discussed in the history as a root cause for language influences. You can see everywhere, whatever the borderline, you can see both languages are contacting together, so language contact takes place there, right? In Sinhala also, we had a long history with other European influences, so that is some sort of contact phenomenon where we can observe the mixed discourse in Sinhala, but that is a common fact. Further, the language contact is not only the reason for lexical influence in Sinhala. So I have divided into two areas. What are they? First, the arrival of British colonizers here in Sri Lanka. That's up to 1948, the first stage. Then the second stage is after 1948, from 1948 today. These two periods are totally different, of course. The influence that we can observe during the colonial period is different from the current influence. The sources, the origin of influence, totally different. See the first, now I'd like to take your attention towards the specific reasons. Yeah, there are political reasons in lexical influence, English lexical influence in Sinhala. What are they? Linguistic and cultural hegemony is a very important reason. What is linguistic hegemony? In the colonial period, the colonizers, they wanted to establish their own language as the official language, as the medium of instruction. School system, university system, and public administration, everything when, of course, everything underwent changes. So that is some sort of a linguistic hegemony, because possibly they enacted the official language here in Sri Lanka. And also here you can see the cultural hegemony. So what is cultural hegemony? So they established through the education system their culture as well. For an example, when they established the university system here in Sri Lanka, the first university college and Peradeniya University, even the hostel that has been planned to transmit the culture. How do they do? Giving Western food items, arranging the room environment, giving a servant and all that, right? So that is some sort of cultural transmission. So the cultural hegemony and linguistic hegemony both ultimately were sort of reasons to the lexical influence in Sinhala, right? So we'll discuss into the depth once again with few more examples later on. Then what are the sociological reasons? Now, inside bracket you can see English is not merely a language, but it is a class, potent weapon and class indicator. There's a period here in Sri Lanka, English-speaking native crowd, they branded as English-speaking classes. Not people, English-speaking classes. So it is some sort of class weapon. For a certain period, now it is of course totally different. Totally different situation here in Sri Lanka. So people think that this is not only a language. For an example, very recently, researcher here in Sri Lanka, British origin researcher called Michael Mailer, he had expressed that the English language usage here in Sri Lanka is not only a language application, that has become a life passion. Not a fashion, but a passion, right? So, on the other way around, that has become fashion. Michael Mailer further says that when you have a fashion in your life, applying certain objects or whatever it is, let's say that cosmetics or whatever it is, so that will not last for a long period, but if that is a language that lasts for long years. So here in Sri Lanka, that is a sociological reason over there. When you use your language as a fashion or a passion, again, that is lasting for a long period. And the intervention of globalization, which we need to discuss into the depth. First we need to understand what globalization is. It has a connotation, it has a denotation. What is the connotation of globalization? The denotation is that is the commercial arrival. But the connotation is withering away the world into a small place. So the globalization, of course, withered the world into a small place. So there were a lot of other arrivals to the country due to this particular concept. But up to 1977, we had a big barrier there were no such arrivals here in Sri Lanka. After that, the commercial ideologies and technological advancements came into Sri Lanka. With those two, technological advancements and the commercial ideologies, the language spread, English language spread in Sinhala, or the language contact. The lexical influence was huge. It's not a simple one. It is very complicated after 1977. What is the turning point? 1977 is the open economic policy here in Sri Lanka. Up to that was a closed economy. Closed economy. We did not have much involvement with the other countries in terms of economic perspectives. But after 1977, it became quite a dramatic fact where we can see a lot of arrivals like technological, commercial ideology. What is an commercial ideology? Further, we don't buy products as we need, of course, because products are calling us. When you are just walking around, suppose that you are in Liberty Plaza or Unity Plaza or Majestic City or whatever the place, you don't want to buy anything. But products are calling you. Those are commercial ideologies. They are calling you when you just see the product, you don't want to buy, but product is calling you. Right? Products are branded using the link language or the universal language or whatever the language English. So through that is part of globalization. It came into Sinhala language. So that is why I am telling you, globalization is a very considerable, huge factor over here. In addition to that, what are the other reasons? There are some other reasons as well: commercial, industrial, and economic imperialism. What is economic imperialism? Now, for an example, the most powerful country at this particular moment is not UK, that is USA, due to several reasons. Looking at the political power and also their autonomy and also their hegemony. Linguistic hegemony is not UK now, that is USA, through several other ways. For an example, over here you can see the industrial and commercial reasons. When you just open up an application in your computer, let's say that is Word or whatever the application, you need to type using a font, particular font. When you type, right, probably you can change it. Maybe the language US, the default inbuilt language is US. That is some sort of a commercial arrival or industrial arrival, right? Moving ahead, apart from all these, you can see internal linguistic factors as well. Those are external factors. What are the internal linguistic factors? Low frequency of words. There are certain Sinhala words which are not frequently being used. For an example, in the university context, you would not say Peter, Katikacharituma, Mahacharituma, because they are not frequent words. Instead, you will be using lecturer, faculty, dean, and so forth. Lectures. Right? When you lose the frequency of words, you are applying whatever the most recent language that you can observe. Right? So that is another internal reason. Apart from that, you can see over here, lexical innovation is related to the well-known tendency of effective words to lose expressive force. And also we have certain words, we don't feel that when you use the mother tongue, it does not have the expressive power. So you are using an English word because you feel that I can communicate well using the English term, so you replace the word. That is an internal linguistic fact. The third one is social value. Of course, that is fading away now, social value. What is the social value? Suppose that you have a language which is treated as a prestige language in the world. Right? You don't have a respect or a regard for your mother tongue, as that is the prestige language. As a social value, you use the word or a term or a sentence while you are speaking Sinhala, while you are using your mother tongue. Right? So English, the situation with the social value, of course, transferring into a different direction by now. So what are they? They are discussed in the concluding part. So these are the concluding remarks. The English lexical influence on Sinhala has taken place not mainly through bilingualism. In other countries, that is the main source. Due to the bilingualism, the mixed discourse has taken place. But in Sinhala, that is not the main point. Linguistic and cultural hegemony are now governed by the USA. For an example, cultural hegemony, now you can see here in Sri Lanka the culture of McDonald's, KFC, Coca-Cola culture, initiated in Australia. Now here in Sri Lanka, of course, we have political authorities, we have cultural police in the country, but still they have not been able to understand what the origin of McDonald's, KFC or Coca-Cola. I do remember when Coca-Cola starting their businesses, when McDonald's started their businesses and KFC in Australia, people objected. They had campaigns to stop coming into the country. McDonald's, KFC that is Cajun fried chicken, and McDonald's, KFC that the initiator was Harlan Sanders. So those are the American origin products. When they brand their products, use only their own mother tongue. What is difference between the production market in China and the USA is that USA uses their cultural and linguistic hegemony there, but Chinese people, they are the huge producer in the world by now, but they don't use their linguistic hegemony and even cultural hegemony because they need to market out the product. They don't want to spread the language and culture in that sense. The USA is very conscious in that perspective. Earlier I told you economic imperialism is another reason. Now USA, in their national budget, they reserve about 5% to intervene in other countries out of national budget through cultural ethics, linguistic hegemony, political reasons and other reasons. So that is not a simple matter. That is not a simple reason. It is very complicated. Then we'll move to the next one. See cultural influence through food and other different utensils. The language of the computer, probably as the default one, are new reasons. So the cultural hegemony in the sense over there, you can see McDonald's, KFC, Coca-Cola culture. We have very huge lexical influence which we cannot avoid because they have registered the English terms, brand names in our mind. They have imprinted, which we cannot avoid further. Then moving ahead over here, you can see what are the mechanisms. Lexical borrowing, code switching, code mixing, were the mechanisms that vehicle lexical items from English to Sinhala. Then cultural innovation has played a main role. What is the cultural innovation? Whatever the product that you introduce to the market, that is sort of a cultural innovation. For an example, here in Sri Lanka you see mobile culture. We did not have mobile phones up to end of 1990s, right? With this production, this is not only just a way of communication, right? We have a big lexical influence through this cultural innovation. This is a technical innovation, but when it came to Sinhala culture, that has become a cultural innovation because in our culture we did not have such a production, right? So the cultural innovation is extremely important in this context. Then American fast food, as I told you earlier, education, the artist in Hollywood and Bollywood, pop culture, and even the Coca-Cola tradition that I told you here before, and a few other things. To the modern efforts of decolonization and huge number of commercial English programs which are conducted all across the country make a huge impact. That's why I told you earlier. Further, the influence that we observed at the outset during the colonial period has undergone a lot of changes by now. What are those changes? You can see huge number of tuition classes all across the country for the purpose of teaching English language. That is the subject, that is the language which is learned by a lot of people in the country, not maths, not science, not the other subjects. So this has created an impact in Sinhala language users to use their mixed discourse. That is further not a class weapon because even in the university you can see here, there are people who are coming from rustic areas and urban areas. All these people are using the mixed discourse. So we cannot observe some sort of class indicator there. And also mixed discourse does not further signify any significant class indicator, that is the conclusion, and mixed discourse does not next one, sorry. The need to designate new things, persons, places and concepts is another reason. That was of course at the outset during the colonial period. Of course I was unable to define in the discussion. For an example, here in Sri Lanka, when you go to upcountry area, there are a lot of places which have been designated using English terms. For an example, Backpool, Spring Valley, Riverston, St. Clair, Devon, all these are sort of cultural terms which came into Sinhala usage in order to designate places and persons, things. Even in certain cities, Sri Lanka, we have English terms. For an example, stay a while and chill out, Trincomalee, to designate places. The teaching efforts and realities in Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan English as a foreign language to play an important role in the case of English lexical influence on modern Sinhala language. Further, we don't have a single variety which is called English. We have Englishers. It has been divided by a scholar into 3 categories. Expanded inner circle, outer circle, and expanded circle Englishers. UK, USA, Australia, you can see inner circle English, the origin of English. But the countries which were governed by those countries like UK, Spain, France, those people govern the world for a certain period. South American countries, South African countries, and Asian countries. In those countries, you can see the English language is being used by now. That is called outer circle English. Now, we fall into that category. Sri Lanka, we fall into that category, outer circle English. There were certain countries which rejected English at the outset. China, Japan, Republic of Korea, Thailand. But recently they understood that they need to teach English language in order to achieve their commercial objectives. So the English which is being used in those countries has been designated as expanded circle English. Now here in Sri Lanka, after colonization, from that particular period we can see the lexical influence. Now, after independence, we have our own variety of English. Right, both efforts, including the colonial effort and the modern effort, you can see sort of a influence to the lexical influence of Sinhala language. What else? There are a few other things. Finally, the reasoning of English language influence on modern Sinhala language can be generalized into 2 ways, considering its evolution and drastic changes of socio-political environments behind the situation. What are they? The first influence I'd like to designate as the top-down influence. Why it is top-down? At that particular period, the British government, colonizers, wanted to spread their language. That is a planned effort. That is a political effort. That is a conscious effort. But by now, after 1948, the influence has drastically changed. So the current influence of English or the lexical influence in Sinhala, I'd like to designate as bottom-up influence, because you can't see a focal point. Nobody is directly influencing, enacting laws to use English language in the country. They don't ask us to use English as the official language or the medium of instruction or the administrative language. But still we do so. Why? That comes to the bottom in many ways. In many ways. What are the ways? Through food, through technology, a sort of economic imperialism, you can't see directly, right? Economic imperialism, yes, that is true, it comes from a political authority. But at the moment, we have taken the drive and we are the one who are studying the language, right? Adding lexical items. So, but what is in progress today is in terms of English influence on modern Sinhala does not have a focal point, which is operated by a single authority, as I told right before. And also, reasons of English influence of today is complementary and multidimensional. What is complementary? It does not have a focal point, as I told you, and also it is not. It is multidimensional. It does not have a particular dimension. Several dimensions. Right? You can see food culture here. You can see the technology. And also you can see English teaching efforts. You can see we are trying to use English as our own indigenous variety. We are trying to introduce our own English. Many efforts are there, right? So that has become a complementary effort, and also that has become multidimensional effort. Involvements of USA and other major countries can further be introduced as a soft, arbitrary intervention. What is soft? What is arbitrary? Soft in the sense, nobody feels that the USA is trying to establish their language in Sri Lanka and in other Asian countries. So it is very soft. Right? And also, it is arbitrary. it has been planned out. It has been planned out. So that is, I am telling you, that is soft but arbitrary. But what is simply clear is that all the reasons of English language influence on modern Sinhala are not almost innocent and natural. Innocent and natural. That is a political expression. That is not an innocent effort. Then what are the future indications? Language planners need to understand that the evolution of modern Sinhala language is not purely natural. If that is not natural, they need to understand what is natural, what is an artificial effort, what is a strategically planned effort. In a way, the language has stepped out further with rich expressions. That also we need to understand. We don't want to be in an extreme corner. The language influence in a way that is good. Why? If we do not have the expressive power of the language, we need to take words, lexical items from other languages. For an example, we did not have a word to designate faculty in Sinhala. So the Sanskrit term we applied into Sinhala as Peter and Pita Dipati. So that is, we did not have the power of expression in the language. So we took words from other languages. So that is, I am telling you, though that is not innocent, though that is not natural, yes, it has a positive side as well. Ultimately, deep and politically conscious studies are required in modern Sinhala language in order to foresee, in order to plan out the language policy in the country. Now, Tamil language in Sri Lanka, those who are very conscious about the language, they have planned the language in the state level. They have removed certain letters, they have included certain letters into the alphabet, but Sinhala, we have not done so. There are letters in Sinhala alphabet which are not further being used. For an example, Ilu Ilu, we don't have words. Some are telling that, yeah, there are 2 words in the dictionary of Monia Williams. So what to do with Monia Williams dictionary? It is there. We don't have the word, 2 words in the language, living language. So no point. So language planners need to understand what the living language is, and they need to plan out the language taking into consideration the current research works. Thank you very much. Open for your questions. In Sinhala, in English, or using the mixed discourse.
So thanks, Mr. Putayantha. Well done. You
පාලි සම්ප්‍රදාය අතරයි ඕකේ යම් වෙනසක් තියෙනවා. අපි පාලි සම්ප්‍රදාය ආරම්භ කරන්නේ අත්ෝ අක්ෂර සංඥාතෝ. ඒකට අකුරෙන් තමයි අර්ථය දැනගන්නේ. අපි දැන් දල කියලා ලියනකොට ඒකට අපි මූර්ධජද කියලා දැනගන්නේ දෘඪ කියන එකකින් ආව නිසා. ඒකට ඒ අකුර දාන්නේ මූර්ධජ ඒ අර්ථය. ඒකට ශබ්දයට අනුව නෙවෙයි පාලි සම්ප්‍රදාය.
ආදරු කියන එකට මම දීර්ඝ උත්තරයක් දෙන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් සිංහලෙත් ඔහොම තියෙනවානේ සංස්කෘත වචන. කෘත සංස්කෘත වචන. කට කඩ කළ වුණ නිසා ඒක මූර්ධජ. මෘත මට මඩ මල වුණ නිසා ඒක මූර්ධජ. හාමුදුරුවෝ වාග් විද්‍යාව ඉගෙන ගත්ත කෙනෙක් නිසා මම හාමුදුරුවොත් එක්ක තර්ක කරන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. නමුත් ඉදිරියේ දවසක මේක ප්‍රසන්ට් කරනකොට අපි ඒ ගැන සාකච්ඡා කරමු. කිසිම භාෂාවක වචන වලටයි අකුරු වලටයි අර්ථ තියෙන්න බෑ. අපි ඒක වෙනම සාකච්ඡා කරමු ගැඹුරින්. නමුත් හාමුදුරුවෝගේ අදහසට බොහොම ස්තුතියි. Thank you very much for all comments.
අපේ උපුල් ගමගේ මහත්මයාට ඉතාමත්ම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. අදහස් ඉදිරිපත් කරපු හැම දිනාටම ලැබෙන්නේ ස්තුතියි. අපි දැන් තේ වේලාව තියෙන්නේ මේක